There comes a moment, perhaps late at night or during a quiet afternoon, when you pause and ask yourself a simple question: who really stayed? Not the ones who laughed the loudest, not the ones who came when the sun was shining, but the one who sat beside you when your world went quiet, when your hands trembled, when you no longer had anything to offer but your truth. As we grow older, the crowd thins, birthdays become quieter, calls come less often, but sometimes, just sometimes, a single voice remains. A friend who doesn't need to be asked, who shows up not for your best, but for your real. Maybe you've known that kind of soul, or maybe you're still waiting to meet them. Some say true friendship is rare, others say we only recognize it when it's tested. But tonight, let's sit together, you and I, and look deeper. What makes someone a true friend? Not by words or length of time, but by presence, by warmth, by the quiet kind of loyalty that feels like a candle in winter or a raft floating with you through the river of samsara. In the parts that follow, we'll explore not just ideas but reflections, 7 gentle truths that reveal who truly walks beside you in this life. So let's begin. Part 1. The one who stays when life gets messy. There is a certain silence that only comes after loss, not the loud kind of loss, the dramatic breakups or final farewells, but the quiet unraveling, the sort of loss that happens when you're simply not yourself anymore. When you're sitting in your living room and the only thing louder than the ticking clock is the ache in your chest, you look around and suddenly, the crowd that used to cheer for you has vanished. And yet, one person stayed. In Buddhist tradition, there's a story of a man named Channa, a loyal companion of Prince Siddhartha before he became the Buddha. Channa served the prince faithfully, first as a charioteer, then as a friend. When Siddhartha chose to abandon palace life and embark on his spiritual journey into the unknown, he left behind wealth, comfort, and certainty. Most would have called him mad, but Channa didn't argue or judge. He simply saddled the horse and rode alongside him into the forest. Years later, when the Buddha returned, transformed by years of meditation and realization, he found that Channa, despite his flaws and pride, had never turned his back. He had struggled, yes, and he had doubted, but he stayed. Through confusion, anger, even arrogance, something within him could not betray that bond. He had walked alongside a man through his undoing and stood witness to his becoming. There's a tenderness in that kind of friendship, isn't there? It's not about convenience, not about fun. It's the kind that says, even when you fall apart, I won't. Now pause for a moment and reflect. Has someone like that ever appeared in your life? Or perhaps more painfully, has someone walked away when you were at your lowest? In the twilight years of our lives, when we carry both the weight of our past and the wisdom that only decades can offer, the faces that remain begin to matter more than the ones that once flashed across our calendars. True friends are not the ones who only invite you when you're joyful, healthy, and easy to be around. They are the ones who see your grief, your bitterness, your unwashed dishes and wrinkled pajamas, and still pull up a chair beside you. I once heard an old monk in Chiang Mai say this while sweeping the temple courtyard. The one who stays for your silence is the one you can trust with your words. Have you ever noticed how, when you're going through something heavy, people begin to disappear? At first they send polite messages, thinking of you or hope you're okay. But then, silence, they don't know what to say, or perhaps your sorrow has made them uncomfortable. But a true friend? They may not say much either, but they will sit beside you and hold space. Not to fix you, but simply to be with you. There's a soft kind of healing in that. In Buddhism, we speak of compassionate presence, a way of being that doesn't require solutions or clever words. It requires stillness, patience, and above all, love without demand. Think of the raft in the teachings of the Buddha, the one that carries you across the river. True friends are like that raft. When you're drowning in illness or depression or the sharp edges of regret, they offer themselves not to save you, but to float beside you until you find your breath again. Of course, this kind of loyalty doesn't announce itself with grand gestures. Often, it's tucked into small, quiet things. The cup of tea left at your door, the voicemail you didn't expect, the way they remembered to ask how your doctor's appointment went. They do not shrink away from the mess. Instead, they lean in, not because they have all the answers, but because something in them understands that presence is a form of prayer. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha says, "An insincere and evil friend is more to be feared than a wild beast. A wild beast may wound your body, but an evil friend will wound your mind." And so the friend who stays, especially when you are not your most lovable, is a gift beyond measure. They remind you that you are not just the sum of your achievements, nor your strength, nor your clarity. You are worthy, even when broken, even when silent, even when undone. So let me ask you now, gently, is there someone who stayed when others walked away? Have you ever been that someone for another soul? As we journey forward, you'll see that a true friend doesn't only appear in your darkest night. Sometimes they are the loudest cheer when your light returns. And that, dear listener, brings us to the next truth of deep friendship, one rooted in joy. Let's continue. Part 2. They celebrate your joy without envy. It's easy to find companions when life brings sorrow. People are naturally drawn to grief because it awakens something tender inside us, an urge to comfort, to offer help, to feel needed. But joy has a strange way of revealing people's true hearts. Have you ever shared good news, only to notice a flicker in someone's eyes, not delight, but discomfort? Maybe it was subtle, a pause that lasted too long, a smile that didn't quite reach their cheeks. Perhaps they changed the subject, or gently turned the conversation back to themselves. It didn't feel like celebration, it felt like comparison. In contrast, there are those rare friends who light up when you shine. They don't shrink when you rise. They expand with you. Your joy doesn't threaten them, it lifts them. This kind of friendship is beautifully reflected in the Buddhist concept of mudita, sympathetic or appreciative joy. It's the quality of the heart that rejoices in the happiness, success, and good fortune of others, without a trace of envy or possessiveness. It is, as the Buddha described, a liberation of the heart. There's a simple but profound story from the Buddha's life that captures this spirit. Once, the Buddha's cousin Devadatta, who had long harbored jealousy toward him, attempted to outshine the Buddha by building his own following and performing acts meant to impress. He meditated, fasted, and proclaimed strict disciplines, but all the while his heart was poisoned by rivalry. One day, a disciple approached the Buddha and said, "Master, are you not troubled by his attempts to surpass you?" The Buddha simply replied, "If he finds peace, let him surpass me. There is no competition in liberation." What an extraordinary view. No competition in liberation. No threat in another's light. Just openness and freedom. Now think about your own life. Can you recall a moment when someone you loved achieved something meaningful? Perhaps a promotion, a new home, a second chance at love, and you celebrated them not because you had to, but because your heart genuinely swelled with pride. Or perhaps it's more tender than that. Maybe it was when someone who had long suffered finally smiled again. You didn't gain anything from their joy, and yet you felt full, simply witnessing it. That's mudita in motion. A true friend is the one who stands at the edge of your victory and claps the loudest. They don't mentally tally your gains against their losses. They don't secretly wish it had been them. They feel your joy as their own. I remember an old man from a monastery in Kyoto who once told me a story. He had a dear friend from childhood. Both had grown up poor. Both had worked the rice fields until their backs ached. But when the friend's grandson was accepted to a university overseas, the monk told me, tears in his eyes, I danced in my room that night. No music, just joy. No music, just joy. How rare it is to find someone who dances for you when no one is watching, who doesn't see your good fortune as a loss to themselves. This spirit of rejoicing goes beyond personal friendship. It touches how we live in community, how we age with grace. For those of us in the latter seasons of life, it's easy to fall into the trap of scarcity, believing that someone else's blessings mean there's less left for us. But the Dharma teaches otherwise. It teaches that joy multiplies when it's shared, that the heart expands through giving, not hoarding. In the Itivataka, a collection of the Buddha's sayings, he reminds us, just as a mother rejoices at her child's happiness, so should we rejoice in the happiness of all beings. So let me ask you, gently, when was the last time you allowed someone else's joy to become your own? Is there a friend whose happiness you've witnessed recently? Did you celebrate it fully, or did you quietly compare it to your own life? There's no shame in these reflections, only learning. As we deepen into awareness, we begin to notice these subtle knots in the heart and untie them with compassion. And in doing so, we discover something unexpected, that when we celebrate others sincerely, the weight on our own soul begins to lift. That lightness, that peace, is where true friendship lives. And speaking of true friends, there's something even more precious than their joy. It's their willingness to sit with your sorrow, not to fix it, not to explain it, but to hear it. And that, dear friend, is where we now turn. Let's continue. Part 3. They listen. Not just to respond, but to understand. There's a kind of listening that doesn't happen with the ears. It happens with the heart. You've likely encountered both kinds. Perhaps you once sat across from someone, pouring out something raw, a memory, a wound, a hope. And you could feel, even before they replied, that they weren't really there. Their eyes wandered, their head nodded politely, but their presence had already drifted. And when they finally responded, it was clear they hadn't truly heard you. It leaves a hollow feeling, doesn't it? As if your words evaporated before they even touched the air. But then there are those rare souls who do something different. They don't just listen, they receive. They lean in, not to interrupt or fix, but to witness. They let silence hang comfortably between sentences, and when they do speak, it feels less like a reply and more like a hand reaching across a quiet space to hold yours. In Buddhist teaching, this is called deep listening or compassionate listening. It is the practice of being fully present for another's suffering, without judgment, without trying to impose our own story onto theirs. Tike Nesht, Hush Nesht. The beloved Vietnamese Zen master spoke of it often. He taught that deep listening is not just a gift to the other person, it is a form of healing in itself. There's a story from the old texts that captures this spirit well. It is said that the Buddha once sat with a grieving woman named Kisa Gotami. Her child had died, and she came to him, weeping and wild-eyed, begging for a miracle. "Please bring my son back," she cried. "You have powers, use them." The Buddha did not dismiss her. He did not offer hollow comforts or spiritual riddles. Instead, he told her, "Go into the village and bring me a mustard seed from a house where no one has ever lost someone they loved." She ran with hope. But as she visited house after house, what she found was sorrow. A mother had lost her husband. A son had lost his father. A widow sat alone with her memories. House after house, The mustard seed remained just out of reach, and slowly she began to understand. She was not alone in her grief. When she returned to the Buddha, her hands were empty, but her heart was different. He sat with her, not to speak, not to teach, but to listen, truly listen. Her story was no longer a burden to be solved. It was a shared sorrow, held between them. That moment of listening, perhaps more than any miracle, became her first step toward awakening. Now pause for a moment. Let your breath settle. Ask yourself, when was the last time someone truly listened to you? Not with pity, not with impatience, but with presence, or perhaps more humbling. When was the last time you listened that way to someone else? We often underestimate how healing our quiet attention can be. In a world that urges us to speak, to post, to reply, to fix, we forget how sacred it is just to be with someone, without offering solutions, without rushing their story. Especially as we age, we may find ourselves repeating the same memories again and again, and sometimes we fear that others are tired of hearing them. But a true friend doesn't listen out of obligation. They listen because those stories matter, because you matter. Even if it's the third time you've told it, even if you lose your place halfway through, a real friend isn't listening for the punchline. They're listening for the truth beneath your words. The grief you don't name, the joy you don't boast, the loneliness you tuck quietly behind your smile. In the Buddhist path, right speech is one of the 8 elements of the Noble Eightfold Path. But what's often forgotten is that listening is just as vital as speaking. Without deep listening, speech becomes noise. With it, even silence becomes a kind of language. I once heard an old lay practitioner describe his friendship with a fellow gardener. Every Sunday, they'd work side by side for hours, saying little. At the end of each day, he'd say, "That man understands me better than anyone." Not a single deep conversation, just deep presence. And so I ask you now, not as a challenge, but as an invitation. Can you become that kind of friend? Not the one with answers, but the one with ears wide open and judgment laid down. Because in the end, we all want the same thing. Not to be fixed, not even to be agreed with, just to be heard, just to be seen. And when you find someone who does that for you, hold them close. That is no ordinary companion. That is someone who listens with the heart. And sometimes that same heart will also tell you a truth you're not ready to hear, but need to. Let us now explore the gentle honesty of true friendship. Let's continue. Part 4. They speak truth with kindness. It's a strange thing, isn't it? How we can sometimes surround ourselves with people who only tell us what we want to hear. Friends who nod politely, who comfort us in our confusion, but who, when it truly matters, remain silent when they should speak. But then once in a while we meet someone who dares to tell us the truth. Not with cruelty, not with ego, but with a kind of warmth that says, "I see you slipping, and I love you too much to stay quiet." There's a quiet courage in that kind of honesty, and not everyone has it. In the Buddhist tradition, there's a story of Venerable Yunanda, the Buddha's beloved attendant and cousin. Yunanda was known for his kindness, for his extraordinary memory, and for his unwavering service to the Buddha. But he was not perfect. There were moments, particularly after the Buddha's death, when Yunanda made decisions clouded by grief and uncertainty. And when that happened, it was Mahakasyapa, one of the elder monks, who stepped forward, not to humiliate him, but to gently correct him. It is said that Mahakasyapa approached Yunanda with clasped hands and eyes full of compassion. He said, "Brother, your heart is pure, but your view is clouded. Let us walk together in clarity." That's what true friends do. They don't use truth as a weapon. They offer it as a lantern, lighting the path not just for you, but beside you. Think for a moment. Have you ever had someone speak a truth to you that hurt at first, but saved you later? I remember a woman I met during a silent retreat in Santa Fe. She was in her 70s, gentle-eyed and soft-spoken, the kind of person who folded her napkin even in silence. One afternoon over tea, she shared with me a memory. Her husband had passed years earlier, and she had fallen into deep sorrow. Her world became smaller, her days filled with what-ifs and unfinished thoughts. She said, "I stopped answering the phone. I stopped combing my hair. I stopped hoping." But then one day, her childhood friend, Clara, appeared on her porch with 2 cups of soup and a single sentence, "I love you too much to watch you disappear." It wasn't said with judgment, it wasn't loud, but it pierced through the fog. And that moment, she told me, was when my healing began. The Buddha spoke of right speech as speech that is timely, true, gentle, and beneficial. When all 4 qualities align, words become medicine. But sometimes, truth is uncomfortable, and we must be careful, because honesty without compassion becomes cruelty, and silence in the face of harm becomes neglect. That is why spiritual friends, Kalya Shamita, are so important on the path. They are not afraid to say, "This choice is hurting you," or "Your anger is consuming you," or "I've noticed you've changed, and I miss the you that used to laugh with your whole chest." They speak not to shame, but to remind you who you truly are. Still, it takes humility to receive that kind of truth, especially in our later years, when we've become so used to being the ones who teach, who advise, who know. It can be hard to hear someone say, "You may need to look again." But this is the beauty of aging, too. We have learned, sometimes painfully, that truth spoken with love is one of life's rarest gifts. So let me ask you, in this quiet space between us, have you silenced your truth to keep a friend comfortable, or avoided someone's concern because it made you feel exposed? And deeper still, is there someone you care about who may need to hear something from you? Not to correct them, but to remind them of their own light. This is not easy work, but it is sacred work. The Dhammapada tells us, if one finds a wise companion who is virtuous and steadfast, let them walk with him joyfully and mindfully, overcoming all dangers. And so we return to the essence of friendship, not to flatter, not to indulge, but to uplift. The friend who offers you truth in the tone of tenderness is worth more than gold. They are your mirror and your compass. And in a world that often spins in circles, such clarity is rare. Sometimes, their love shows up in a single sentence, spoken at the right time, with the right silence before and after. And if you've ever received such a sentence, you'll never forget it. But truth, as vital as it is not always spoken. Sometimes it's remembered in the smallest of ways. And that brings us gently to the next shape of real friendship. Let's continue. Part 5. They remember the little things. It's often not the grand gestures that stay with us. It's the cup of tea, made just the way you like it, without you having to ask. The way someone remembers your dog's name, even though they've never met him. The phone call on the anniversary of a loss you never speak of. The gentle pause before they say, "I remember you told me this was a hard week." These are not the loud moments of friendship. They don't sparkle in photos, but they shine in the heart. To remember the little things is to say, "You matter to me, not just the big parts of your life, but the small, quiet details that most people overlook." And that kind of remembering is love. In Buddhism, the practice of sati, mindfulness, is not merely about being present in meditation. It is about remembering what is worthy. It's the awareness that each moment, each interaction, holds the seeds of care if we are willing to notice. There's a beloved tale from the time of the Buddha about a poor woman named Sujata. She was a humble rice farmer who once offered a bowl of sweetened milk to Siddhartha during his harsh ascetic period, just before his awakening. The Buddha, years later, when surrounded by kings and disciples, spoke of her not as an ordinary giver, but as one whose gesture of compassion became a turning point on the path to enlightenment. And here's the part often overlooked. He remembered her name long after he became the awakened one, long after empires rose and fell. He remembered Sujata, not because she was powerful or rich, but because she saw him when he was most human. Sometimes the smallest memories carry the deepest truths. I once met a man named Harold, in his 80s, who had been married for over 50 years. When his wife passed, he carried a folded note in his wallet, something she had written decades earlier in hurried pencil during a stormy afternoon. It wasn't romantic. It simply said, "Don't forget the laundry, and don't forget you are loved." He smiled as he read it aloud and said, "She remembered the laundry, and she remembered me." And perhaps that's what we all long for, to be remembered not just in titles or achievements, but in the fabric of someone's ordinary life. Do you recall a friend who remembered your smallest stories? Not just your birthday, but the way your voice changes when you speak of your father, the song that always makes you tear up, the scar on your knee from childhood, the fact that you hate cilantro. Those are the things that disappear in a crowd, but are held like treasures by someone who truly sees you. In the teachings of mindfulness, we are reminded again and again, attention is love. What you attend to, you nourish. What you remember, you honor. And what you forget, you risk letting fade. That's why a friend who remembers not just what's visible but what's meaningful is a rare and beautiful presence. Let me ask you this. When was the last time someone remembered something about you that you didn't expect them to? How did it feel? And in return, who have you remembered lately? Have you held on to something they thought you'd forgotten? These exchanges are sacred. They are the silent prayers of friendship. And perhaps as we get older, we become the keepers of memory, not just our own, but each other's. We remember who someone was before the illness, before the divorce, before the silence set in. We hold the thread of their wholeness, even when they forget it themselves. In the Udana, the Buddha once said, "What is well remembered leads to what is well lived." So today, consider this. Friendship is not always about what we do. Sometimes it's about what we quietly carry. The joke from 3 summers ago, the way they like their toast, the story they told you once softly, slowly, and never again. And now, as we gently continue, we arrive at a deeper kind of devotion, one that doesn't just remember you, but protects you. Let's continue. Part 6. They defend you. Even when you're not around, there is a kind of loyalty that speaks loudest in silence. Not the kind that rushes to your defense with banners and swords, but the quiet kind. The kind that shows up not when you're present, but when you're not. When someone else speaks your name with cruelty, mockery, or misunderstanding, and a true friend gently but firmly says, "That's not the person I know." You may never hear about it. They may never tell you, but somewhere in a room you didn't walk into, someone stood up for you, and that matters. In the Buddhist tradition, this kind of steadfastness, this unshakable loyalty, is rooted in the value of right action and right speech, not just for ourselves but for others. It is not about defending ego. It's about protecting the truth, the integrity of a human soul who deserves compassion even in their absence. There's a well-loved story from the Jataka tales, the Buddha's past life stories, that captures this beautifully. In one of his former lives, The Bodhisattva was born as a noble elephant, white, strong, and full of grace. He lived in a forest where travelers often passed, seeking safety under his shade. One day, a group of hunters falsely accused a nearby deer of ruining their traps. Though the deer was not present, others began to believe the rumor. But the noble elephant, having known the deer, stood before the gathering and said, "I have walked with him. I have seen his footprints. There is no malice in his step. If you punish him, you punish the wrong one." The deer was spared, not by his own defense, but by a friend who remembered his nature and dared to speak it aloud. How many of us have wished for that? For someone to remember our better nature when all others seem to forget. Sometimes, our worst moments become our reputation. A mistake, a moment of weakness, a season of sorrow. These things cling to us in ways that joy never does. But a true friend remembers the whole story. They know that a single page does not define the book. And so they speak up, not loudly but with stillness and clarity. I once met a retired school teacher named Aline, in her late 60s, with a voice like soft gravel and eyes that had seen too much to be fooled. She told me about a friend of hers, Lydia, who had made a terrible decision during a rough time in her life. People talked, whispers grew, and Darlene. She showed up at every coffee gathering, every quiet corner, and said, "Lydia's mistake doesn't erase her kindness. I've seen her care for strangers, pay for a child's school supplies, sing to her mother when she was dying." She never told Lydia, but she stood guard over her name, like a lantern in fog. And maybe that's what a true friend really is, a quiet guardian of your dignity. In the Sigalovada Sutta, the Buddha offers advice on true friendship. He says, "A friend who restrains you from wrongdoing, who supports you in trouble, who defends you behind your back, is to be cherished like a treasure." Behind your back, not for credit, not for praise, but because it is right. So I ask you now, in this space of reflection, have you ever felt protected by someone when you weren't there to defend yourself? How did it change you? And more quietly still, have you ever allowed someone's reputation to be bruised because it was easier to stay silent? We all have moments where we wish we'd done more, but it's never too late to become that kind of friend, because what we protect in others, we cultivate in ourselves. To defend someone with compassion, even when they're not in the room, is to become a bridge between who they are and who they are becoming. And when someone does that for you, without your knowing, it becomes a silent form of grace, a karmic wind that carries your name forward gently. And now, as we prepare to close this circle of friendship, we come to one of the rarest gifts of all, not just being remembered or defended, but being truly seen as we are. Let's continue. Part 7. They make you feel seen, just as you are. There is a moment, quiet, unspoken, almost imperceptible, when someone looks at you and doesn't see your titles, your struggles, your flaws, or your victories. They see you, not the version you've polished for the world, not the mask you wear at family gatherings, but the honest, breathing, trembling soul beneath it all. And they don't flinch, they don't judge, they don't step back. In fact, they move closer. That moment, that feeling is rare. And when you've known it, even just once in your life, you remember it forever. In the Buddhist scriptures, there's a tale about Rohini, a woman who had suffered from a terrible skin disease and was shunned by many, including her own relatives. She lived in isolation, hiding her face behind veils, her heart behind silence. But one day, she encountered the venerable Yonanda, the Buddha's attendant, who, upon hearing of her condition, not only did not turn away, but invited her into the temple grounds. They questioned, but Yonanda simply said, We all suffer in different ways, some on the skin, some in the heart. But suffering does not make us less worthy of love. Over time, through mindfulness, service and compassion, Rohini's body began to heal, but more importantly, her spirit unfolded. She became known not for her scars, but for her generosity and devotion. And in the presence of those who truly saw her, she no longer needed to hide. This, dear listener, is the miracle of being seen, not fixed, not praised, not tolerated. Seen. Have you ever had someone look at you, not to assess or compare, but simply to understand? To notice the quiet ways you hold pain in your shoulders, or the particular way your voice breaks when speaking about a certain season in your life. There's a kind of friendship that offers this depth of perception. It doesn't demand that you sparkle or perform. It welcomes you in your wholeness, your contradictions, your quirks, your shadows, your awkwardness. And somehow, through their eyes, you begin to see yourself not as broken, but as human. There's something healing in that. I remember a woman named June. She was in her 70s when I met her, always in linen, always with a sprig of lavender tucked into her pocket. She once told me, "My best friend is the only person who doesn't try to cheer me up when I'm quiet. She just sits with me, and somehow that makes the silence feel less lonely." June said that on her birthday, her friend would never buy her gifts. Instead, she'd write her a letter titled, "All the Ways I've Seen You This Year." One year it read, "I saw the way you clenched your jaw at the doctor's office but didn't cry. I saw you forgive someone who never apologized. I saw you wear yellow again, even though you said you wouldn't. I saw you show up again and again when you didn't feel like you had anything left to give." That kind of seeing is not surface level. It is sati, mindful awareness, not just of breath or posture, but of another person's soul. To witness them with full attention is a sacred act. The Buddha once said, "Just as a lotus rises from muddy water, yet remains unstained, so does the one who sees clearly hold no judgment." To see someone clearly is not to label them. It is to honor their becoming. And so I ask you, quietly, who has seen you, not for who you once were, or who you pretend to be, but for who you truly are? And when they saw you, did you let them in? And even more gently, have you allowed yourself to see someone else that way, without trying to change them, without waiting for them to be easier, better, more like you? As we age, we often feel increasingly invisible. The world moves fast, and we are no longer the center of the room. But true friendship doesn't care about status or speed. It sees you in your stillness. It notices when you stop laughing. It remembers the stories behind your silence. To be truly seen is to be reminded. You are not alone. You don't have to pretend. You don't have to shrink. You don't have to be anyone other than the person you are, in this moment, breathing, complex, and infinitely worthy. And with that, dear friend, we have quietly walked together through the 7 ways a true companion reveals themselves, not always loudly, but always faithfully. But before we end, there is one more space to enter, where we gather all these reflections and sit with the final thought. What does this kind of friendship invite us to become? Let's continue. So now, as the evening deepens and this quiet reflection draws to a close, let us pause and breathe together. We have journeyed through 7 signs of true friendship, companionship that does not waver when life becomes difficult, joy that celebrates without envy, the healing art of listening, truth spoken with kindness, small memories that carry great meaning, silent protection in our absence, and the rare gift of being fully seen. These are not flashy things. They do not shout for attention. They unfold slowly, like a lotus in still water, delicate, steady, and deeply rooted. And perhaps that is what makes true friendship so sacred. It is not found in the noise, but in the stillness. Not in how many people surround us, but in who remains when everything else fades. Maybe someone came to mind as you listened. A friend from long ago, a neighbor, a spouse, or someone you lost, but whose presence still lingers in the corners of your heart. If they are still here, tell them. If they are gone, remember them. And if you have not found them yet, trust sometimes the friend we long for is also looking for us. The Buddha once said, "Good friends, good companions, and good associates are the whole of the holy life." May you find such a friend, and more importantly, may you become one. Until we meet again, may you walk gently through your days, and may you be seen, held, and remembered, not just for what you've done, but for the quiet light you carry within you.